Jaron Jarvis Channel, Top 20 Scary Stories of the Day from Reddit nosleep. 2018, 10:03. Story 1, There's a Dead Girl on Snapchat. I got a notification last night from Snapchat telling me that a friend of mine had just joined. The problem is, she was murdered 5 years ago. Lydia was a good friend of mine from back in the day. She was part of our little group that would hang out. We would all go to the movies, out to eat, celebrate each other's birthdays, and so on. I'm not even sure how all of us started hanging out. At first it was just 2 or 3 of us, and then next thing I know, we're rolling 25 deep to Cheddar's on a random Friday just because we had nothing else to do. Naveed joined our little group for a small amount of time, but mainly because he had a bit of a crush on Lydia. That's fine. You get a large group of 20-somethings together, and you're bound to end up with some coupling up. In fact, most of that group of people from back then decided to marry each other. It seemed normal for Naveed to have feelings for one of the girls. Nobody really thought anything of it. Well, at least until things started getting weird. It started small, with Naveed asking Lydia out on some dates. They went out a few times, but Lydia wasn't interested in him that way. She told him as much, but he didn't really take the hint. When we went out as a group, he insisted on sitting next to her and would even get a little angry if someone else tried to take that seat. At some point, the two of them had a conversation where she told him it was time for him to back off and stop trying to make something happen that clearly wasn't there. This led to Naveed slowly fading away from the group. The other people tried to keep him involved and even tried to hang out with him separately, but no such luck. Hawkeye was really good at that. He genuinely loves being around people and spent a lot of time with Naveed, just the two of them hanging out. Of course that stopped at some point too. On Valentine's Day 5 years ago, I got that terrible phone call that Lydia had been murdered. Naveed showed up at her apartment early in the evening with flowers and a stuffed teddy bear. Sunflowers. They were Lydia's favorite. He was waiting for her where she normally parked. She got home and a pretty heated discussion happened between the two of them. From what I heard from one of her neighbors at the funeral, she was trying to get him to understand that the two of them were never going to happen and he was belligerently refusing to accept that fact. He pulled out a gun and shot her in the face right there. She died almost instantly. The next few months were a blur. We were all so devastated that something like that could happen to us. It seemed to come from nowhere. Between the funeral, investigations, trial, and all the emotional heaviness that each of those carry, it was no surprise that our fun little group slowly started to disband. Naveed is in jail serving a life sentence for first-degree murder. The girls that Lydia was closest to started a little memorial page on Facebook that still sees activity even after all this time. I'll still talk to a few of them every now and then, but I've mostly started hanging out with a different group of people. Lydia still crosses my mind from time to time. I remember visiting her at the fast food place she worked at and her always hooking it up with a little bit extra food in my bag. We would always make plans to take our dogs on a date together, but it never really happened. Last night I was hanging out with some friends, just relaxing playing some cards. I got a notification on my phone from Snapchat. Lydia P has joined Snapchat. My stomach dropped. I stared at my screen for what felt like an eternity. My screen dimmed and I looked up and one of my buddies asked if everything was okay. I guess I had turned a little pale as every drop of blood fled from my face and seemed to pool together in my chest. Time seemed at a standstill as I tried to figure out what was happening. Oh yeah, I finally responded, I'm fine. Just the coffee. You know how it messes me up sometimes. I got up and went to the bathroom to relieve myself and splash a little water on my face. The initial shock of seeing her name on my phone wore off and I started to think logically. I still have Lydia's number in my phone after all these years. I've probably switched phones a dozen times since her murder, but her number is still in there. Sure, my phone will delete my mom's number when I get a new phone, but Lydia's stays. Technology is confusing sometimes. The only logical answer is that the phone company reassigned her number and this person has joined Snapchat for the first time. I washed my hands and with it the initial terror I felt went down the drain. My buddies thought the story was creepy as hell when I told them, but there was still this nagging in the back of my mind and pit of my stomach. Must be the coffee, I told myself on the drive home. As is the norm before falling asleep, I found myself switching from all my social media in bed. Instagram, Facebook, Reddit, maybe a little Tumblr, and if I'm really bored I guess I'll check Snapchat. I have Android and Snapchat is pure garbage on Android, so I rarely get on there. I had forgotten about the Lydia situation until the second that I tapped that little icon. The app opened up to a dark screen as the camera tried to pick up my feet in my pitch-black bedroom. My dog was curled up at my feet, knocked out from playing with her whoopee earlier. There was a notification in Snapchat that let me know I had a new follower. I knew it was whoever had Lydia's old number, but found it weird that they would follow me. Sure, I have her number still in my phone, but how would this new person know who I am or to follow me? I opened the notification and looked at her name next to that solid red ghost. My mind flashed back to sitting in the drive-thru and joking about how she was going to get herself in trouble for those extra 2 tacos. She really was a great girl. Beautiful brown eyes and a smile that seemed to make the world just a little bit brighter. I really did miss her. I tapped on the notification mainly out of a compulsion I have to not have unread notifications in my apps. My dog exhaled in exasperation and jumped off the bed. I heard her scurry to her cage a little bit faster than she normally does when she's ready to sleep in there. She started panting pretty heavily. I turned to my left to look in the direction of her cage. She made this weird whiny/growl noise that I've never really heard her make before and continued to pant as though she had just come in from outside. My phone screen dimmed and I jumped a little at the sudden darkness. I ran my finger over the scanner to unlock and turn on the screen and got more blackness. Stupid app always reopens in the camera instead of where I left off. I was expecting to have a little light in the room but just had the blackness of my camera trying to pick up my feet again. No wait. The bottom left of the camera viewfinder had a weird haze to it. I moved my phone to the left with trepidation to see what sort of madness my phone seemed to detect. My thumb tapped the screen to make sure it didn't go dim again and a small circle popped up to try and focus on whatever this strange haze was in my room. I couldn't help but shiver as my dog's panting got a little more intense and I heard her shuffle around in her cage. That's enough of this, I thought, and went to my friend list to see what was going on with this person who had Lydia's old phone number. Whoever they were, they had already posted a story or two. The small circle next to the name Lydia was black, and I could see some text there. Without knowing why, I tapped it. The first story was a video of what looked like a parking lot. It was hard to tell because the phone was moving so much, but I could see the yellow lines of a parking spot. The camera started to slow down a little bit and I could see what looked like dark red marks on the floor. My blood froze in my veins as I realized I was looking at the blood-stained parking lot of Lydia's apartment complex. There was a second of pause as the story reached its time limit and moved on to the next portion, still recording the yellow lines and red stains. My dog is frantic at this point. She ran from her cage and started scratching at the door, no longer wanting to be in there. There was no way I was getting up to let her out. I'm not even sure I could do nothing but grasp my phone with both hands. She jumped on the bed and whimpered at me and then ran back in her cage to cower. The next story started. It was a bright white screen that hurt my eyes after being in the dark for so long. The camera moved back a little and I saw the white fur of a teddy bear holding a giant red heart that said "Life without you is unbearable." It was only on screen long enough to barely make out what it said, but I recognized it right away from the trial. It was the bear Naveed gave Lydia on the night he killed her. My screen went black again as the next story started, but only for a second or two. It lit up again, but this time yellow and black as my eyes stared at a large sunflower. I felt a tear escape my eye and seemed to exhale for the first time for what felt like hours. I had been holding my breath. I was suddenly aware of how cold the room was. My eyes moved frantically fast in their sockets as I looked at every detail of the sunflower. The story had been going for a while now, as it was just a video of the same sunflower filmed over what was probably 2 minutes. I was captivated and couldn't take my eyes off the screen. Even blinking felt like a betrayal. Finally, the story ended and my screen went black. I heard myself whimper in relief. The next screen was what I saw in the thumbnail before I tapped on it. It was a solid black screen with white text that was comprised of only 3 words. He got out. I threw my phone out of my hands and ran out of my room. I could feel the hot bile in the back of my throat and tried to make it to the bathroom before it erupted out of my mouth. I didn't make it to the toilet and instead retched in my bathroom sink. Red vomit stained my sink and I jumped as I heard my dog begin to furiously bark. I crouched over my sink and tried to stop throwing up. When I glanced my reflection, dimly lit from the small nightlight I keep in my bathroom, I could tell my eyes were bloodshot from the effort of pushing out the bile. I felt a wave of coldness waft through the bathroom and the vomit suddenly stopped. A couple of coughs and some mouthwash and I realized the coldness of the room was gone. My dog was still barking. I called for her to be quiet and she whimpered and I heard her cage rattle as she found her way back inside of it. It took me a while to work up the courage to go back to my room, but my logical mind prevailed and I came to the conclusion that someone must be pranking me. When I got back to my room, my phone was face up on the floor, still lit. The same story was on there. A black screen with 3 little words. As I stared down at it, the story changed to a black screen with 2 more words. Warn Hawkeye. Story 2, to whatever licks my fingers at night, what the hell is your problem? Okay, guess what? I am done with your shit. I know you're reading this, I know you've been going through my stuff and everything. And I know you lick my fingers while I'm asleep. I'm not going to put up with you any longer. To everyone else who happens to read this, I'm sorry. I'm sorry for that weird introduction, I'm not that rude usually. It's just I can't take this any longer. This thing, or person, or whatever it is driving me insane. For some background, I'm just a young woman who lives alone with her cat and her fish, and I am not used to being, well, bothered at home. And I know how ridiculous all of this might sound to you. See, I chose this place to live because, even though it's close to work and all kinds of stores, it's still peaceful and quiet and kind of gives off that small town vibe and the neighborhood is nice, too. I like it here, really. I am writing this because I know whoever or whatever is doing all these weird things will read this. It's been going through the stuff on my cell phone and laptop. Maybe this will be enough to finally let it know that I do not want it here. It all began a week ago. I woke up about noon and, since I didn't have to go to work, took my sweet time to get up. Upon wiping a strand of hair out of my forehead, I felt something wet on my face. Then, I became aware of the same sensation on my fingers. I held my hand in front of my face. My vision was still a little blurry, but I could see that there was a transparent liquid on the tips of my index, ring and middle finger. Saliva? I grimaced. My cat had probably come into bed with me and licked my hand. Even though she really didn't slobber that much usually. Weird, I thought, and disgusting, but I let it slide. I got up and washed my hands, then fed my fish and checked on the kitty Cloudy. I called, upon seeing her laying on my sofa, seemingly asleep. She looked up at me, meowed once and then turned around, ignoring me demonstratively. I shrugged and went to grab her bowl, discovering that she had eaten the extra snack I always put into it for her at night in case breakfast would be served later than usual. But upon picking up the bowl, I noticed about 3 or 4 greasy fingerprints on it. I decided that I probably had left them yesterday night when I filled up Cloudy's bowl already asleep. I took it into the kitchen to clean it up and after I was done, I filled it with food and placed it on the floor in front of the entrance door. Then I went to feed the fish. The rest of the noon passed by uneventfully. Around 2 p.m., my cell phone buzzed. It was a friend of mine, asking whether I would like to come watch a play with her, a musical in which her sister took part in as an actress. I told her I would love to, and so I went to dress up and grab my wallet and some other necessities which I all threw into my handbag. I was good to go and made my way to the door, but then, I halted. On the dresser in the living room lay 3 open magazines, and a 4th right in front of the dresser on the floor. I frowned. This was not right. I remembered that I had placed them neatly on the kitchen table yesterday evening. Not on the dresser. I swallowed. There was no way Cloudy could have brought them there somehow. I tried to soothe my mind with the unstable theory of my memory being false, that I just had been really sleepy. But the suspicion kept lingering in the back of my head as I walked out the door and got into my car, and even as I sat next to my friend, following the events on stage, a part of me still thought of how in the world those damn magazines got onto my drawer. What I saw upon returning home made things even worse. The magazines were not on the dresser anymore. I frowned and proceeded into the living room, and sure enough, there they lay. On my sofa. Right next to an empty coffee mug. By then all attempts to soothe my mind with rationalizing had gone futile. I could no longer tell myself that I had put them there. And even if there had been a tiny chance that Cloudy could have misplaced the magazines, she could not have done that with a coffee mug. For a moment, I thought of calling the police, but then again, what were they supposed to do? Search for someone who moved around magazines and coffee mugs in my flat? It was more likely they would send me to a psychiatric clinic right away or let me do a drug test. Or just tell me that I worried too much. Damn, I myself wasn't sure if I was not going crazy. I sat down to think. I placed my cat's water bowl and pillow in the bathroom and the aquarium in the small box room. As night time arrived, I locked Cloudy away in the bathroom. Afterwards I went to bed, a baseball bat next to me and a kitchen knife under my pillow. I told myself that I was safe, that my pets were safe, no one could get into my bedroom, and even if they would break down the locked door, I would be at least able to defend myself. It felt as if I had only slept for 5 minutes when a loud thumping noise woke me up. My eyes shot open and I looked onto the alarm clock on my nightstand next to me. 1 a.m. My hand reached out for the bat, but just as my fingertips touched its wood, I halted. My fingers were wet. Sticky and wet, just as they were the previous morning. The realization shook me to my very core. My cat was in the bathroom. Whoever or whatever was in my apartment had licked my hands. A look over to the door confirmed my disgusting suspicion. Even in the darkness I could see that it was wide open. But how? I was sure that I had locked it. I grabbed the bat and my knife and proceeded out of my bedroom and into my living room. I switched on the light and looked around. My table had been knocked over. That must have caused the thumping noise. "Hello?" I called out. "I know someone's here, come out this instant. I'll call the police." No answer. Still on edge, I took out my cell phone, which I had kept in my pocket overnight, and dialed 911. As the police arrived about 10 minutes later, I was waiting outside the door with Cloudy in my arms. I made sure to keep the saliva on my hand. Maybe they could use it to track down my late-night visitor. I told the officer questioning me everything, including the events of the previous morning. The officer let me smear some of the slobber on my fingers onto a cotton swab and put it into a plastic bag. He suggested me to spend the next few nights in a hotel and I agreed. The officer also told me that even though the signs of a break-in were obvious, they had found no way for the culprit to enter my flat. They had however found the back door broken down from the inside. They had already been in my apartment. To say that I was scared would be an understatement. I spent the rest of the early morning hours packing, and at around 8, I visited the lady that lived in the apartment next to mine. I knew her, and since she had taken care of my pets before, I asked her to care of my cat and my fish for me while I was gone. With that taken care of, I drove off to the hotel and rented a room for the next 5 nights. I spent my time watching TV and waiting for news from the police, but nothing came of it, and the days at the hotel passed by uneventfully. Until this very morning. I woke up at around 10. I yawned and turned around in my bed. From here I could see the small table on which I had placed my laptop and cell phone. I blinked in confusion. It couldn't be. My laptop was opened, and on the bright screen, I could see one of my writing documents. I shot up and ran over to it. Sure enough, it was one of work reports. I picked up my cell phone and felt my eyes widen. Someone had opened my instant messenger. I dropped my phone and sank back onto my bed. I raised my hand to scratch my face when I realized it. My fingers were wet. Gooey and wet. I am typing this out on my cell phone and will leave it laying around here at night. I'm not as scared as before anymore, now I am mostly furious. So if you read this, and I know you do, what is your fucking problem? What do you want from me? Why do you lick my fingers? If you think I don't mind you, that's wrong. Just stop it. Leave me the hell alone. Story 3, I found something really weird in a house I've been renovating. Like the rest of my siblings, I work for my parents' business. When the first of those house flipping shows started getting popular, my parents, like a lot of people I imagine, thought that they could do what the professionals on the TV shows did but better. To all of our surprise, including my parents, they turned out to be pretty good at it. My mother's skills on a canvas turned out to transfer quite well to repainting a house, and my father could sniff out a good deal a mile away. The rest of my siblings and I were contracted as cheap labor in order to keep them from having to hire outside help. 6 years after flipping their first house, and for the first time in my life, they were able to start saving money for my college. A good thing too, since I wasn't likely to receive any academic scholarships. We found something weird in the latest house we were restoring though. Something that defies any amount of explanation. A single-family home with a basement in the suburb of Mesa, Arizona, just outside of Phoenix. This was odd in and of itself because there aren't very many homes with basements in Phoenix because of the costs associated with digging that deep into the clay less than 10 feet below the surface. Combine that with the lack of bone-chilling winters, and not many people were willing to pay the huge price tag to dig an unnecessary basement. Besides crazy people, the only ones who really wanted the basements were Mormons. Where else are you going to store a year's worth of food to survive the rapture? My father got the house for a good price at an auction, and we started working on it about a month ago. I understood how my father got the price that he did after I saw it for the first time. There was flood damage in the basement and a lot of the wood flooring needed to be replaced. The upstairs wasn't much better. The only occupant for the last couple of years was an elderly man who hadn't been able to keep up with the normal maintenance a house requires. There were deep stains below the carpets that I could only assume were made by a dog or cat who had nowhere else to use the bathroom. The house itself was up for auction because the family of the elderly man didn't have the time to sell it from Nebraska and saw an auction as an easy way to get rid of a problem no one wanted to deal with. To make a long story short, it was a fixer-upper. So I was in the basement of this ugly-ass banana yellow house taking out pieces of rotted wooden flooring in the basement when I tore out a large chunk of flood-damaged boards to find a safe hidden under the floor. A small safe used to keep birth certificates and car title safe in case of a house fire. "How's the floor coming, Philip?" I jumped a bit, surprised to hear my dad in the basement. 15 minutes of trying to get the safe out of the hole in the floor had proved futile. "Could you come here and help me lift this?" I asked. He came over and looked into the hole. His eyes opened a bit when he saw the safe. "Holy shit. You think it has secret Nazi gold?" I looked at my father, always the bad joker, and sighed, "Could you just help me get the damn thing out of this hole?" We did get it out and upstairs. My mother and younger brother marveled at it a bit before finding out we had no idea how to open and returned to repainting the living room. I wanted to try and open it, but my father reminded me that we didn't bring the sledgehammer with us and that the basement still had rotted floorboards. So I didn't have a chance to try and open it until we got home. Which I did immediately upon getting home. Or tried to. For how cheap it looked and how small it was, it held up to a sledgehammer a lot better than I expected. After a trip to the tool shed and a pry bar, I was finally able to get the damn thing open. It was a photo album. Anticlimactic, to be sure, but I wasn't going to let the disappointment keep me from my prize. So I took the photo album to inside to show off the prize of my labors. "Was that the only thing in there?" my little brother asked when I brought the photo album in. He seemed disappointed. "No Nazi gold, unfortunately," I answered. My dad popped his head around the corner. Did someone say Nazi gold? No Nazi gold, Dad. Just this. I held up the photo album. Have you looked at it yet? He asked. I just got the damn safe open. Give me a second to catch my breath. I sat down at the kitchen table with the photo album and opened it. It was. How are you in that photo? My brother asked. He was right. It was me, at my current age, in an army uniform posing with a number of other soldiers in front of a store with Korean writing on it. I'm not in the photo. It's just someone that looks like me, I said before turning the page. Another photo of me. This one of me in coveralls welding a door to the side of large car on an assembly line. That's a 60s Eldorado. My father said, your grandfather had one when I was growing up. I was born in 2001 and have not at any point in my 17 years of life been in either the Korean War or worked on an assembly line for 1960s Cadillacs. I turned the page to find more and more photos of myself in impossibly anachronistic situations. Me without a shirt in the mud dancing with a young woman in a hippie skirt while Jimi Hendrix played on a stage a couple dozen feet away. I don't appreciate the joke, Philip. I looked at another photo. A black and white one of me in a three-piece suit, drinking a glass of champagne with a number of other finely dressed people in front of a banner that proudly displayed Happy New Year and 1927. This isn't a joke, Dad. I just brought this in from the safe less than 5 minutes ago. I said. I went back to the first page, the one with me in the army uniform, and took it out. I looked at to see if there was any possibility of it being faked. It was aged, warping at the edges, and appropriately tanned from exposure to the sun. I turned it over and saw a bit of writing on the back. Seoul, 1952. Where would I even have the time to fake this many photos? I turned the pages in front of everyone. Another page and me in another place. A ridiculous suit in a disco club. Sitting in the gunner's seat of a B-2 bomber. Even one of me in a top hat in what looked like a daguerreotype portrait. I was in every photo of that worn-out photo album. No matter the time period the photo was in, no matter the situation, I was in every single photo. I really wish we would have found Nazi gold instead. My little brother said. R/Corder 23. Story 4. Several people got sick at work last week. It got worse this morning. I have a legit one for you guys that actually is still fresh. Everyone is pretty shocked here, and it's on everyone's minds. In the last 2 weeks, my co-workers started getting sick. I work in a pretty big office complex for a large company, think 200 to 300 employees. I personally didn't notice it at first, but our attention was drawn to it when our HR department sent out an email. The message was pretty standard: if you feel sick, don't come into work and spread it around, blah blah blah. They reminded us of flu season, and that we should get our shots for extra protection. At the end of the email, it said approximately 20 employees took sick leave this week. Please, sanitize your desks, wash your hands thoroughly, and work from home if you feel sick and your work assignments permit you to do so. 20 people in a week is insane, even for such a large company. I started listening in on the gossip in the break room, and it was just story after story of coworkers getting sick and going home. I butted in a couple of times, asking what kind of symptoms they had. The responses were standard for the flu: headaches, throwing up, and feeling super tired. Normally, I wouldn't care or take an interest in this, but I'd never heard of a workplace with 20 people getting sick in a week. I hung around the most talkative co-workers so I could get the most up-to-date news on what was going on. My attention to the gossip wasn't worth much, because soon everyone knew. On Monday, yesterday, the entire workplace was full of conversation. Over the weekend, 12 of those who left the previous week had been hospitalized. A guy a couple rows over from me apparently started convulsing on Friday night after staying late. Security had been patrolling and found him on the floor. Still no word on his condition. The entire office was freaking out. Several people were wearing white masks you'd see in a hospital or on the streets of China. Several more people were working from home, taking advice from HR for once. I had gone in because I'd thought it would be over after the weekend. The break room became the newsroom. The area was more crowded than usual, lots of people like me trying to get the scoop on what was going on. There were so many people filling cups and talking that the ice machine couldn't freeze new ice fast enough. You'd click for ice and it would come out as a slurry of ice chunks and water. The break room had never been so popular. People sat around drinking coffee and ice/slurry water while discussing what it could be. People were Googling symptoms, jokingly claiming a government experiment, or a carbon monoxide leak. That last one was actually brought up by a maintenance guy who joined the break room. He admitted that on Friday, they had called the fire department to search for leaking gas or anything that could affect that many people. They came up with nothing. The official story was that it was a super strong, medicine-resistant strain of the flu. By noon that day, no one was buying that. Co-workers received updates from those in the hospital. Several of their symptoms had progressed. They were having difficulty speaking, they couldn't feed themselves because their limbs were uncontrollable, and several others had gone into convulsions as well. At 2 p.m., the place was cleared out. No one wanted to risk getting sick, including me. I took my laptop home and worked from there. It sucked because news was much more scarce at home. But no one was at the office, so staying would have been pointless and risky. HR sent out another email, stating they were hiring a cleaning crew to completely scrub down the entire office. They didn't mention it, but one of my co-workers pinged our team to say 2 more of our co-workers got hospitalized, along with 3 others outside of our team. All after they'd left the office. I was literally about to log out for the day at 5 p.m. when my team lead messaged us all again, office being scrubbed. A potential source has been found. I'll let you know if it's safe tomorrow to come in. Then logged off immediately. My team lead is pretty high up in the company. In fact, we're one of the few departments that are led directly by one of the big guys in charge. So he wasn't available to hang around and chat about it. I wondered what it was all night yesterday. I hated that cryptic way of informing us. This morning, at 8 a.m. sharp, our team lead logged on and told us that the CEO would be sending out a mass email, explaining everything. I'm going to edit it a little, for privacy's sake. I don't want to say the company either, since they'll be playing PR on this and looking for any mention of the incident. But if there's no name, it'll be harder for them to find. I know you've all been worried about the sickness going around the office. Yesterday, after thoroughly testing the building and cleaning frequently trafficked locations, we have found what we believe to be the culprit. An individual was fired for insubordination 3 months ago. That individual was rehired under a false name, and decided to exact revenge on our employees. This individual placed copious amounts of antifreeze inside the ice and water dispensers, as well as some in the coffee pots. Antifreeze poisoning causes symptoms that align with what our employees have experienced. Many times, symptoms do not surface immediately. The minor symptoms of headaches and fatigue and vomiting can take up to 12 hours after consuming antifreeze. The major symptoms, such as convulsions, inability to urinate, and rapid breathing, can take up to 72 hours to manifest. Because of the distributed nature of the timelines of symptoms, it was believed that this was an extreme strain of the flu. I can say now that it is safe to return to work at the building. The water, ice, and coffee dispensers have all been removed and will be replaced later this week. If you consumed any of the fluids from the water, ice, or coffee machines in the last few weeks, please visit a hospital immediately for treatment. The source of the illness was discovered by cleaning crews routing through garbage bins as part of our thorough cleaning process. Several empty containers of antifreeze were discovered there. At this time, the individual has been apprehended by police. Cameras captured them contaminating the machines and the relevant tapes have been turned over to the police. Today, all non-essential personnel should not return to work until they've visited a doctor or hospital and received a clean bill of health. We care about the safety of our employees, and will require the clean bill of health from your doctor. Please turn these over to your manager when you return to work. We sincerely hope that no further tragedies will occur as a result. And now it's with a heavy heart that I announce that one of our employees was poisoned beyond remedy and passed away last night. 2 others are in comas. Your manager should have reached out to you already if any of those individuals are on your team. We will be extending paid time off to anyone who was poisoned by this incident. Please email your manager with your request so they can be processed. A doctor's note will be required for the extended paid time off. Our security team has been working around the clock since yesterday, working with police to identify how this individual slipped these chemicals past our security, and how they were hired under a false name. We will take every step necessary to aid the police in their prosecution. We appreciate all of you and sincerely wish you a clean bill of health. The email sounds very sincere, but I'm still pissed over a few actions they did and didn't take. I'm mainly pissed that if they found the antifreeze yesterday like my team lead implies, why the hell wasn't there an emergency text to everyone in the company saying get to the hospital? I smell a scandal coming about that. I'm about to send emails to reporters right after posting this. I wrote this as a way to get the timeline down so I could talk straight when asked about it. I'll refer news agencies here as they pick up the story. I'm actually in the hospital now. I did have some ice water from the machine, especially while the gossiping was going on. I wondered why I woke up so groggy and in so much pain. The meds I got, fomepizole or something, are supposed to work over a couple of hours, so I've been sitting in a hospital bed, writing this up on my phone while all my coworkers have been pinging each other, trying to figure out what everyone's condition is. The police have been in to talk to me and several other people who are here. It sounds like this is about to blow the fuck up. I get to be a first witness to a news story for the first time ever. It's not as exciting as the news would have you believe, though. Here's to hoping there's no permanent damage to my body. Story 5, First she stole my voice. I have no name. I'm nobody. I used to be Naomi King, 21, resident of Flagstaff, Arizona, English major. Now I'm no one and the new Naomi King is living my life. She changed her major to psychology and she got a nose job. I suppose you're waiting for some background information, and I will give it to you. However, it's been so long since anyone has listened to what I have to say, that I feel as if I need to go off on a tangent and talk about myself for a while. You can skip this next part if you want. I'll never know. My life was pretty mediocre up until about a month ago. I was a college student living at home, I didn't have a job, I had anxiety, very few friends, and I had never been on a date. I wasn't upset with any of this. None of those things fazed me. I was actually pretty content with my life. I liked living at home because I liked my family. I didn't really mind not having a job, considering that I never really went out anywhere and wasn't in need of much money. The anxiety was a little annoying, but I had been dealing with that for a while already. The few friends that I had were great people and I didn't strive to have a giant group of people around me at all times. The date thing didn't really bother me either. Everything was fine. It wasn't terrific, and it wasn't anything to brag about, but it was okay. I met Pauline Heller at the coffee shop on my college campus. It was the second week of September, and I remember that because I was on my period that day and had only stopped at the cafe to get a tea in an attempt to tone down the cramps that were killing me. I paid for my tea, turned around to leave, and almost ran into her. I remember apologizing, and I also remembered that she appeared to be very composed for someone who was almost burned with very hot tea. Don't worry about it. She cheered. Yes. Cheered. She said it the way that someone would announce an engagement or something similar. I smiled at her and stepped around her, and went to class. I saw her again about 2 hours later. She had parked her car right next to mine. I didn't recognize her at first. Why would I? A ton of people had the same long brown hair, and I hadn't really taken much notice of her outfit because it didn't really stand out. Red sweater, jeans, and black Converse high tops. I opened my passenger side door and threw my stuff in, and when I looked up after closing it, I saw her looking at me and smiling. It was a generic friendly smile, like the kind you give to people that you accidentally make eye contact with. But it felt creepy and invasive. Like if you woke up, opened your curtains and saw someone staring at you from across the street. I gave her a weak smile in return and walked around to the driver's side of the car. I'm Pauline Emahela, she said to me. I looked over at her as I opened the car door. I replied. Her eyes widened and then her smile did, and she tucked her hair behind her ears with her index fingers. I thought it was weird because I had never seen anyone do that before. What's your name? She asked. She spoke too loud, and with too much enthusiasm for this conversation. She sounded like a doll. You know, the ones that speak in an overexcited tone when you press their stomachs. Like that. Naomi. I replied. Naomi what? She asked. She was still smiling and she was standing weird, with her arms at her sides but too far out. Again, like a doll. Naomi Flynn. I replied, giving her my stepfather's last name instead of my own. She stopped smiling and stood there with her mouth partially open, staring at me with huge blue eyes. That's a nice name, she said. Still overexcited. Yeah, I replied. She stared at me again, and it was like half of her face had frozen up. Her eyes were still wide like they were when she was smiling, but her mouth now looked more like a frown. I have to go, I said, getting into my car. I drove away from there and looked into the rear view mirror, where she still was. She had turned her body around to stare at me. I got home and I couldn't stop thinking about her. Why was she so weird? I thought that maybe she was new, or not from here. Maybe she had just learned English, and that accounted for the overexcited tone that she spoke in. I kept seeing Pauline around everywhere. Everywhere. She was sitting outside my literature class when I walked out. She was always parked right next to my car, even if her car hadn't been there when I arrived. She started going to my gym and using every machine that I used, right after I was done with it. A few weeks after that she began to copy my outfits. I showed up to class on Monday wearing a black sweater dress and sneakers, and she showed up on Tuesday wearing the same thing. Then she followed me on Instagram and I blocked her page. Then she made a new one and I blocked that too. And then she made a new one, and well, you get it. First, she stole my voice. I don't know how. I don't think she's human. But I don't know what she is. I don't know how she did it either. It was about a week ago. I was on the phone, walking to my car while I talked to my friend about plans we had that weekend. She appeared next to me out of nowhere, and when I hung up the phone, she spoke. I just love your voice, she said. I turned to look at her. Her face looked more normal, and her voice sounded more normal too. Thanks, I replied. She grinned. No. Thank you, she replied. I stared at her, confused, and she sprinted off, finally leaving me alone for once. 2 hours later, I couldn't talk anymore. She came by that evening, and when I opened the door, she smiled at me. Hi, she exclaimed. In my voice. I stood there, stunned. Cat got your tongue? Oh no, wait. It's more like, I've got your voice. She sang the word voice and then grinned again. I opened my mouth to ask what was going on, but no sound came out. Oh no, you won't be doing that anymore, she replied. I stared at her and then reached to close the door, but she held it open. By the way, she said in her previous voice now, I just love your hair. I stared at her. Thanks, she exclaimed in my voice. Then she left. The next morning when I woke up, my hair was dead and brittle. I couldn't even scream. I didn't go to class. I stayed home for 3 days straight. She came by again on the 4th day, and when I didn't open the door, she climbed into my backyard and knocked on the window. I turned to look at her, and she had my hair now. Blonde and straight. Hello, oh, she sang in my voice. I turned my back to her. Can I just say one small thing? She asked. I shook my head and ran out of the room and into the hall closet, where there were no windows. A few seconds later there was a huge crash and I slowly walked out into the hall. She came running around the corner and slammed me to the ground, pinning me down as she sat on my chest. I just love your life, she sneered. For a split second, I swear she turned into a demon. A horrid, ugly demon. Her face swelled like she had been dead in a lake for days. She had no hair on her head. Instead, her scalp was covered in dents and cuts. She was missing her left eye, her nose was crooked, she had no teeth. Then, just as suddenly, she turned into me. She smiled down at me and sighed, getting off of my body. I stood up too, and ran into my room, locking the door behind me. I turned around and faced the mirror and I froze. I was gone. My eyes were gone, but I could still see. My nose was gone, but I could breathe. My mouth was gone, and I still couldn't speak. All of my features were gone. Are gone. I'm just a flesh on a skeleton, with no identity. And no one but Pauline can see me. I guess I should call her Naomi now. She ignores me. She's too busy living my life now. I can still do things. I can watch TV, I can read, I can type this. But no one can see me. Yesterday something changed though. I can't speak, but I can type. So I decided to try something out. I think Naomi thinks I'm stupid, because she leaves her laptop and phone out, and she hasn't changed the passwords. When she was showering, I logged in and sent my friend Lola an email. It wasn't a cry for help, or a warning or anything like that. I was just testing a theory. I just sent her a compliment. I've always liked her hair. Big, shiny chocolate-colored curls. She, of course, said thank you, Lola is a very nice person. This morning when I looked in the mirror, I still didn't have any features on my face. But I did have a full head of gorgeous curls. And I think I just love the sound of Lola's voice. Story 6, I found a baby factory online, please tell me this is a scam. I was never the kind of guy that was getting high on drugs or watched porn a lot. But I was the kind of guy that was curious of the oddities of human nature. No, I'm not talking about the simple-minded, not the serial killers, not the ones torturing people. I was fascinated by freaks. Not only since I saw American Horror Story Freak Show, I was fascinated by all kinds of malformations of the human body. It all started when I was around 9 years old and my mother took me to the state fair. There I saw a fake mermaid in a plastic pool and this picture kept stuck in my mind ever since. Over the years I had seen hundreds of photos of P.T. Barnum sideshow freaks. The internet has a lot to offer, but once you've seen all the pictures, you know the life stories of Lobster Boy and dwarfs and giants and all those creatures that were presented to the audience as monsters over the years, but were actually only poor people, with which Mother Nature had just played around. It was around the time when I first heard of the deep web or darknet. As far as I heard, there was supposed to be everything. Photos, videos, weapons, drugs, everything you could imagine. I was not interested in the weapons, the drugs, and even porn was not interesting to me, but photos and videos of people with 3 arms or 2 heads, that was what I was looking for. So I dealt with the usual things that every new deep web user does: download and install the Tor browser, get a throwaway email address, change my browser settings, cover the webcam of the laptop with tape, all the stuff you do to protect yourself and your privacy. After 2 evenings preparation and watching some YouTube videos about what you should consider, I dared to go onto the deep web. The deep web wiki was confusing. I did not find what I was looking for right away. It took about 2 hours and many dead links until I found the first photos of people who had to live with all possible hereditary diseases. Faces that looked like goats, like monkeys, a little girl whose face looked like that of a mouse. I knew some of them might have been created by Photoshop, but I was fascinated. I clicked through a few dozen photos and even found some videos of Siamese twins and a little girl with 4 arms and 4 legs and a boy with a giant eye on his forehead instead of 2 eyes. I found a woman with 3 boobs and a man with 2 penises. A pair of Siamese twins that shared their genitals. And a picture of a man with a that went down all the way to his knee. I have to say, I did not regret all the time I invested in preparing for my visit to the deep web. It was worth it. I got the show I was looking for, and yes, I downloaded a bunch of pictures for my little personal collection as well. You see, everybody has their own little secret, and mine is collecting all those pictures of the unfortunate creatures out there. No harm for anyone, Right just as I wanted to leave the deep web and go to bed, I came across a link that did not fit into my search criteria. Perfect baby. Just that. No explanation. Well, some parents looked at their children as perfect, even if they were not. Perhaps that was another specimen? Pictures of malformations on newborns? Worth to give it a try, I guessed. I clicked the link and landed on a site that was actually very good and elaborately designed for deep web conditions. As far as I could say, after only one evening on the deep web, web design was not a priority for the creators of those sites. This site was different. Photos of healthy babies on both sides of the website, in the middle just one sentence in bold letters. You want the perfect baby? Click here. Out of curiosity, I clicked the link. What I was about to find out was not what I expected. I landed on a questionnaire. There I should check the boxes on how my future child should look: skin color, eye color, hair color, size, stature. Then came questions about the child's face: freckles, dimples, cheekbones, narrow or full lips, round or narrow eyes, almond-shaped, eye angle up or down, small stub nose or straight long nose. I clicked on what came to my mind and then clicked enter. It took a little while, then two faces were presented to me. A young girl, maybe 16 or 17 years old. Blonde, green eyes, freckles, stubs nose. She stared blank at the camera. And a young man, perhaps 18 or 19 years old, blonde, also green eyes, light skin and full lips. A forced smile on his face. In the middle were two photos of babies, about a couple of weeks old, which resembled the two young people. Including some sentences that turned out to be the satisfied reviews of former customers. We are very satisfied with the service. Our new daughter looks exactly as we would have liked. The wait was definitely worth it. We'll be ordering a sibling in a few years. And we are thrilled by our little son. He's just perfect. Even the freckles are exactly as ordered. We soon plan to order another child. The price is appropriate for the good work. What was that? Some fertility center? I went back to the questionnaire and started a new search, this time the complete difference of the last one. The result was a young girl, not older than 15, that matched what I had clicked on, and a boy, about the same age. In between them a picture of a baby. And a review that read: "This order was the best we could ever do. Our new baby looks exactly as we ordered it. We'll order another one soon." No way those two were ordering a baby at a fertility clinic. But what was that? I started browsing through the testimonials. All satisfied customers, about 70 or 80, I did not count them. Each with a picture of a baby, some newborn, some a couple of weeks old. That was when I stumbled upon a section hidden between all the happy baby faces. Clearance. I clicks it, only to find a series of pictures of baby, mostly older than the others in the testimonials. They were between 3 to 8 months old, each with a short profile. I clicked one, it read: Baby 97. Male. Mother Caucasian, father African. 7 months old. Picture attached. Can be ordered right away. Costumers backed out of the purchase because of failed relationship. No damages, no issues. Calm demeanor. Can eat some solid foods already. Special price, $4,000. Can be shipped anytime from now. I clicked another one. Baby 122. Female. Mother Asian, father African. 8 months old. Pictures on demand. Can be ordered right away. Costumers failed payment. No damages. Some issues with food allergies, nothing serious. Sometimes crying, can be calmed with medication. Special price, $3,250,000. Can be shipped anytime from now. And another one. Baby 68. Female. Mother European, father European. 11 months old. Pictures attached. Can be ordered right away. Costumers failed payment. Some damages to the brain due to difficulties at birth. Might have some issues with mental development in the future. Needs to be calmed with medication. Special price, $1,250,00. Can be shipped any time from now. This was no fertility center. This was some kind of baby factory. But who were the biological parents? I browsed around a bit more and found a database of maternal material, as it was called. There were pictures of girls, about 45 of them. They all had a profile. I clicked the first on the list. Female 12. 23 years old. Brown hair. Fair skin. Blue eyes. Dimples at cheeks and chin. Small nose. Small ears. Slim built. 5 foot 2 inches. Successful deliveries, 9. Male deliveries, 3. Female deliveries, 6. Current status, in progress. Then the second. Female 19. 18 years old. Blonde hair. Fair skin. Green eyes. No dimples. Small nose. Small ears. Slim built. 5 foot 3 inches. Successful deliveries, 5. Male deliveries, 4. Female deliveries, 1. Current status, in progress. I went back and looked for the fathers. There were about 15 of them. I clicked the most rated. Male 8. 25 years old. Blonde hair. Fair skin. Blue eyes. No dimples. Straight nose. Medium ears. Muscular body. 6 foot 2 inches. Successful progress, 21. Male deliveries, 12. Female deliveries, 9 inches. Deliveries in progress, 3. I clicked the second rated. Male 13. 17 years old. Brown hair. Medium skin. Brown eyes. Dimples on chin. Straight nose. Medium ears. Regular body. 6 foot 1 inch. Successful progress, 4. Male deliveries, 1. Female deliveries, 3. Deliveries in progress, 2 inches. How was that even possible? Were these girls impregnated by those boys and men on demand? Were there couples sitting at home at their computers or at a cafe in public, browsing the dark net and ordering a baby like other people are ordering shoes or clothes or a new hairdryer from the internet? And who were the girls and women who voluntarily received one baby after another, from men who were chosen for them, only to sell the babies after their birth? Or didn't they do this voluntarily? Was this some kind of factory where the women and men were being held hostage to produce babies that were then sold? Manufactured according to the wishes of the customers? What a sick idea. I searched the page again, looking for a link that I might have overlooked, a sort of description of the place. An imprint, an address, something that told me where this place was. Species appropriate husbandry. That was the link I was looking for. I clicked on it just to find a series of shaky photos of young women, all obviously pregnant in various stages of pregnancy. In the pictures they could be seen sitting in a darkened room, some reading books or playing cards, others sitting on old worn-out sofas, staring blank and emotionless to the floor. They all wore dirty nightshirts and slippers. No one smiled. No one had that typical glow on their faces. The pictures were more like the old pictures of a madhouse than a modern clinic where happy young women would give birth to their children. Our program participants are fed and maintained according to the requirements of a pregnancy. Various types of daytime entertainment are available to them, among others reading, listening to music, playing chess, card games and comfortable seating furniture that make a pregnancy enjoyable. Honestly, this site must be a sick joke or a scam. No way people were held under these conditions and forced to have one baby after the other. This just could not be true. And who were they anyways? Were they patients of an asylum? Runaways? Prostitutes? A cult? Were they kidnapped and taken there against their will? But if they were, shouldn't their faces look familiar from missing persons pictures? I kept reading further down the site. In case you are worried that any of our participants will be linked genetically to your baby in the future, we assure you that no former participant will ever be able to claim any of the children to be theirs. This is what we guarantee. I went back to the questionnaire and let it run one more time. I created a perfect baby and then waited for the result. The page came up with the pictures of a girl, looking so young, she could be only 12 years, if not younger. And a man, about 25 to 30 I guess. There was no picture of a baby. Instead it read, "New female in the program. Get a discount of 30% off, being the first one ordering from female 46. Order now." I clicked order now and a new window opened. There was a form I was supposed to fill out, with my personal information and the final price for the child, $45,000, 50% to be paid up front. I left the website and closed my laptop. This could not be real. It's a scam, right? Right? Story 7, Mary Frances. It's always hard to make friends. For me it was almost impossible. I was overweight most of my childhood and pockmarked from acne as a preteen, and my hair was always greasy looking. Other kids picked on me and shrieked if they got close enough to touch me. I grew up in a bubble, unable to connect with another living soul other than my long-suffering parents. The family next door was a group of misfits that you would think would be right up my alley, but no. They avoided everybody always. So, it was strange that in my freshman year, Mary Frances, who lived next door with the misfit family, became my first real friend. She was a tiny little thing with wide-set, large blue eyes and ragdoll curls. She and I were polar opposites in appearance, but she was also abused by most of the school for being an oddball. We spent all day together as our schedules allowed, and I started wearing my hair in similar curls. We dressed in the same colors during the day and we coordinated talking on the phone all night. My parents were absolutely thrilled I had a new friend, and Mary Frances said her parents were happy about it too, but I never saw them. She wasn't allowed to stay overnight, but I was just happy with what I had. She had a secret too, but wouldn't tell me at first, then later decided it would be the test of true friendship to see how I would react. I guess I reacted well because our friendship continued. Mary Frances told me a ghost story. That's all. Apparently she had a grandfather she never met. Her parents had a picture of him in overalls and a necktie standing in front of their house. The picture was black and white and she promised to show me one day. She never did. So the grandfather visited her, at the end of her bed. Her spectral visitor told her she would get a disease and be very sick, but that she would be okay. He said the doctors would tell her she couldn't have kids, but she really could, and not to listen to him. He said that her father was dead and that the man she thought was her father was really her stepfather. Then he disappeared. She said her mom got mad and accused her of listening at doors when she told her mom about everything. She swore that a ghost told her, but her mom punished her anyway. Mary Frances said she even saw that his suspenders were held up by a safety pin, which you couldn't tell in the picture, but her mom still got mad. Turns out her dad was really her stepdad and her birth father ran off with somebody else. What was the weirdest was she did get sick. She had juvenile diabetes, which got diagnosed 2 years later when she fainted in the school gym. I didn't need to remind her about her grandfather, it was fresh on her mind the next day I saw her. We had been best friends for 2 solid years and told each other everything. After that she told me he wasn't the only ghost she saw. One was a ghost that didn't talk to her, it just followed her from room to room. A creepy guy if you ask me. Another one was a little old lady with a huge bun on her head and stood about 4 feet tall. A grandmother type, but both of her grandmas were alive. So in our junior year everything got weird. Mary Frances got hugely fat, and ate lots of food at lunch that she brought from home. Before that she bought a school lunch. About 3 months into the huge belly days I realized she was pregnant. She would have told me if she was dating anybody, and the only person she hung out with was me, and I'm a girl too. It was a mystery and I asked her about it and she wouldn't talk about it or even acknowledge the baby. Finally, a teacher noticed and they sent Mary Frances to a school for girls. We lost touch then. I graduated and made my way into the world. In college I hit my stride and now I have a family of my own and a wonderful husband. I was visiting my parents with my twin sons and I got a note from Mary Frances slipped under the front door. Dawn. They took my baby. Help me get her back. Meet me at the schoolyard. 10 p.m. tonight. The ghosts are watching. Mary Frances. So here I am in the lot of the high school, at 10:15 p.m. waiting on Mary Frances, in the dark wondering if the ghosts are watching. Story 8, Burger Joint Journals. A little outside of town Terry's an old, run-down burger joint that's open 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and if I have to be honest I don't have an idea why. Most of the nights here are uneventful. I might just clean and make a or two burger for the rare late-night drifter, but sometimes weird things happen here. You see, the burger joint is surrounded by a dark thick forest on all sides except from the one that's facing the road, and when it becomes night the creatures from the forest starts to get curious about the world, and the people. I have seen a lot of weird things working at this burger joint, especially at night. One time I saw what looked like a combination of a turkey and a deer. I can't really describe what it looked like, you have to see it to understand what I mean. Another time I was outside to throw some trash into the dumpster when I ran directly into a stick figure. It wasn't a stick figure like the ones you drew when you were little. It had feet, legs, a torso, arms, hands and a head just like any other human, but instead of normal body parts it had sticks. After I had run into it, it just got back up and flipped me off before walking back into the woods. There are a lot more to the forest than that, like for example the cult. I think they are a cult anyway, mostly because of the chanting I sometimes hear at night, plus the fact that they are wearing robes. Sometimes some of them come into the burger joint to either order something or to try make me join them. I have refused them every single time, but they just keep trying, but I don't really care since they aren't trying to kill me and because it's fun to fuck with them. Since they are a part of this cult they don't hear about the world, and if they do it's through me. Once I told this one cult member that scientists had made a cat and dog hybrid and he just accepted it as fact. If you were to enter the burger joint the first thing you would see is either me or another employee. If it's late in the evening or night you would probably see me since I have almost all the night shifts. Luckily for me most of the weirdest things that happen here only happens at night, but sometimes things also happen at day, but that's mostly inside the burger joint. Sometime when people enter the burger joint they would just faint for a couple of seconds, that's it. The only really dangerous thing that can happen when fainting is if you fall and hit your head, but don't worry, only one person has died because of it, at least for now. Another thing that happens inside the burger joint is that the light sometimes turns off by itself. This may not sound that weird to you, but the weird thing about it isn't that they are turned off, but the way they are. I might be minding my own business reading a book or listening to some music when the lights suddenly turn off, and most of the time I can't just turn them on again because the light bulbs aren't there. They would sometimes just disappear and never show up again, and then I have to change them in the dark, and that's just annoying. Now you have to understand that the burger joint isn't anything special, because shit like this happen all over the town. Just here a few days ago the kiosk in the lost its third employee this month, and according to what I have heard he got strangled by a plant that grew out from the sewer. You ask me, I think it has something to do with the forest. A lot of crazy shit comes out from them, and what I have written about is just the tip of the iceberg. Well, I need to get back to work now, so I'll be off. I might come back in a few days or if something big happens, but the point is that I'm coming back. I think this will help me on boring nights at the burger joint, especially the ones where the scarecrow isn't talking to me. I forgot to mention the scarecrow. Well, about a month ago the scarecrow across the road started to move. Not just like it got closer every time I looked at it, but it actually is walking around, and sometimes it comes over to the burger joint and stands outside the window and talks to me, but I can tell about that in my next post. Story 9, There's Something Evil in the Woods. I've seen it. I created this account and am posting this because I need to know what to do. I mean, I know what I should do, but I'm conflicted. I don't feel like anybody would believe me. My family, including myself, maybe up until recently, has always been a group of avid outdoorsmen. We hike, we hunt, fish, camp, canoe, kayak, any of that stuff, you name it, we've probably done it. Brothers, sisters, cousins, grandparents, pretty much any extended family I can think of, we're all very outdoorsy people. Especially autumn/winter activities. Cross-country skiing, snowshoeing, that kind of thing. And I've always had a lot of fun with it. Of course, being out in the wilderness, you sometimes see or hear some strange things. Sometimes you get spooked by animals. Sometimes your head tries to make sense of something weird and it comes up with some strange things. You have to understand, I've always been a skeptic of anything supernatural. I've never believed in the paranormal, aliens, Bigfoot, wacko conspiracy theories. I've always firmly believed that it's all just your brain trying to make sense of things that maybe it can't explain with the available facts. But I can tell you, without a doubt, this isn't my brain trying to rationalize something with a normal explanation. I'm not paranoid. This isn't imagination. I saw it. I only saw it once, maybe twice, but I know it's followed me before. This was just the final nail in the coffin that finally made me realize it wasn't just me getting spooked by my imagination. First of all, when did this start? To be frank, I can't really pinpoint it. Really, it's gone as far back as I can remember, but I don't know which things were truly just my imagination, and which times it really was this thing. Recently, however, within the past 5 years or so, these events started happening more in earnest, and it's when I sincerely started to become concerned. Like I said before, weird stuff happens out in the forests and the mountains. I always used to brush it off as that, but these last 5 years, it's different. I'll detail a few examples. I don't want to give away any super exact locations for reasons I'll explain later, but I live in Montana with my wife, and we do our outdoors activities all around this region, and even as far as Alberta or BC. My uncle on my mother's side owns some property here in Montana, and the cabin there is a popular activity destination for our family on that side. We often go out there just to hike around, snowshoe in the winter, or to simply relax and enjoy the weekend out in nature. On this particular occasion, my wife, then girlfriend, and I were going to spend a 3-day weekend at the cabin with my sister and her husband, and it was only late autumn/early winter, so we thought we'd explore some of the trails near the property before snow started to make the place impassable without snowshoes or skis. It was a routine trip. So we got there, unpacked all our stuff from the car, and enjoyed that Friday evening without incident. There was already some patchy snow, but it wasn't so cold that we needed winter gear or anything, just some heavier coats and a warm hat or scarf or something. We had a lovely fire that night, we talked, toasted some things on the fire, nothing was amiss. Normal camping trip, didn't think too much of it. The next day, though, was when things started to change about my attitude towards the outdoors. That morning was a bit lazy. We cooked and ate breakfast inside the cabin, then lounged around and played some board games until afternoon. It wasn't until about 2 or 3 that we decided to go exploring some trails, and we knew we only had a few hours to do so since it was starting to get dark a little earlier, so we set out. It was really nice for a while. The air was crisp, there was a breeze that wasn't too cold, and the nature was beautiful. This place wasn't entirely alpine, so there were even some autumn colors to be seen, though it was a bit sparse. There were patches of snow here and there. We even got into a few playful snowball fights, but for the most part we only walked and enjoyed the scenery, not talking too much. The trail was surprisingly wide and well kept for one that appeared to not be well traveled. As we started to near sunset, we turned around and headed back for the cabin, and for whatever reason, I started lagging behind. My wife walked alongside my sister and her husband, and they had struck up a conversation about something. I just walked roughly 30 feet behind them with my hands in my pockets, enjoying the little tufts of autumn color that I could see at the bases of some of the pines. A while into this, something started to feel off to me. The sounds of the woods seemed dulled. It wasn't quite winter yet, so there were still a few animals roaming about, but the normal level of sound seemed to drop noticeably. I was intrigued by it, and started lagging behind a little farther. This was a mistake. The dulling got stronger, and all at once, all the sounds of the woods seemed to just stop. Dead. Not even the wind. It even felt like the air had gotten heavy, like it felt more difficult to breathe. I was freaked out. I had never felt this unnerved before. It's cliché to say, but I distinctly felt like I was being watched, and my back felt chilly, like some primal instinct was telling me there was something behind me. I stopped dead in my tracks. I don't know if it was because of fear or what, but I just stopped. Something broke the silence. It was only slight, but the silence was so deep that I noticed it immediately. A rustling, behind me and to the right, like a pine cone had just fallen. But from that same direction I heard what sounded like a voice, only something was off about it. It sounded artificial? I don't know, it was like some AI that was trying to learn how to make a human voice. I couldn't even quite make out what it was saying, but it sounded female. Either way, I didn't stick around to consider it too much, I booked it back to catch up with the group. My fight or flight instinct went into full swing. I was extremely disturbed, and I couldn't even quite pinpoint why. I just wanted to get away. When I caught up with the others, they hadn't noticed anything wrong, and not wanting to appear scared for no reason, I didn't tell them what happened. On the way back to the cabin I insisted on staying close to them, and in front of them if I could. I was feeling pretty disturbed. Was it an animal? A bear or something? I couldn't figure it out. But as we got back to the cabin I started to let it go a little bit. I tried to chalk it up to my mind making stuff up. The sun was starting to set, and it looked like some snow was starting to blow in, and we settled in for the night. I didn't speak of it. I brushed it off. That night, however, proved to only stoke this growing fire. Around midnight or 1 a.m. the snow was getting pretty heavy, almost worryingly so, though I was the only one awake to see it. I was in my cot by a window, and the snow was building up fast, and I hoped we'd still be able to drive out in the morning. But as I was watching the snowfall, things started to feel off again. About 20 yards or so from the window was where the tree line began, and in the dim light, I could faintly see the branches rustling. I couldn't really see anything for sure, but I could definitely see there was movement, and I could definitely sense a presence there. Considering the experience I'd had earlier, I was feeling pretty unnerved again. Hairs standing up on my neck. I watched that part of the tree line for at least 20 minutes after the movement stopped, and eventually I was able to make out some details as my eyes adjusted. Eyes. I saw eyes. From whatever little light there was, it was reflecting off of two unmistakable eyes. Empty white dots. And they were directed right at my window. Unblinking. I must have stared at those eyes that whole time, and I continued staring at them for another 5 seconds before turning back over in my cot, eyes wide. My heart was pounding, I didn't know what to do. I didn't want to get up and move. I froze up. I didn't want it, whatever it was, to know I knew it was there. The only thing I could think to do was lay there. And that's what I did for the rest of the night. I couldn't fall asleep knowing that I was being watched. I was on edge the whole night. I didn't want to turn back over to see if what I'd seen was real. I just froze there for the rest of the night. That morning I suggested we leave because of the snow, though you know the real reason, and we packed up our cars. I didn't really want to, but as we packed, I investigated the tree line outside my window. I had to know. The snow had covered up a lot, but I definitely found some sort of footprints. Bipedal footprints. But due to the snow, I couldn't make out any more than that. I only wanted to get out of there as quickly as I possibly could. Things only got worse after this experience. I became more paranoid whenever I went out in the woods. I had a few more strange and unnerving experiences before this next example, such as feelings of being watched and the whole silence thing, though not quite to the same extent. But this was one of the more notable of these experiences. My senses were now more heightened whenever I went hiking. I still wasn't certain that what was happening to me was real. Part of me still said that it was all in my head. But with each strange experience, the doubt dwindled. This was roughly 2 years later, though still in the same approximate area as my uncle's property. My wife and I had finally gotten married that summer, and again, this happened in late autumn or early winter. I was with my sister and her husband again and with my cousins on my mother's side. We were staying at a group campground near a relatively popular lake, and we were on the last day of this 4-day fishing trip. I had brought my German Shepherd Yukon with me. Despite being an outdoorsman family and having gone hunting a lot in my earlier years, I wasn't particularly fond of carrying firearms, though now I wish I did. Yukon gave me the sense of security that some got from carrying a firearm. He was a typically very calm and friendly dog, but he knows a threat when he sees one, and I knew he'd be a great deterrent to any crazy person I came across. After my previous experiences, I usually tried to stay with groups whenever I went out in the woods, but I felt more comfortable going alone with the Yukon with me. I felt like it was a relatively popular place to camp anyway, so I thought there would be people close by at most times, so I decided to go for a little walk around the lake with Yukon. It was afternoon, but not too close to sunset, and I was feeling pretty confident with Yukon, coupled with the fact that I could see across the lake to some campsites. My mistake came when I decided to let Yukon follow a creek heading away from the trail. There was more snow on the ground compared to the last experience near my uncle's property, but it wasn't enough to be too much of a concern. Yukon trudged through it without problem, but he seemed to be following something, not just the creek. It looked like he'd picked up a scent trail, and he was trying to find the source. He seemed pretty intent on it, so I just followed. That's when it happened again. The woods fell silent. It wasn't gradual like last time. Just out of nowhere, the world stopped. The trees stopped moving in the breeze, all the animal noises faded away, and again, the air felt dense and heavy. Yukon felt the same distress that I did. His ears immediately drooped and he started whimpering, and I was starting to panic. I was on the verge of breaking into a sprint, and again, I felt the presence. Chills in my spine. Yukon was barking uncontrollably. I wanted to run. I heard a voice. If I had to describe it, I'd say it was female again, and it almost sounded like a mix of my sister and my wife, though it was slurred. This time I could make out the words, and it came from maybe 15 yards ahead. "I'm over here. Can you come help? I need help. Please help." My instincts finally got the better of me. I stumbled backwards, trying to run away, and Yukon was barking and snarling like I've never heard before. I took off back to the trail and started towards the shortest route to our group campsite. The fight or flight had taken over once again. This time, though, I felt like I was being chased. The heavy air followed me, and I heard rustles in the bushes and treetops behind me, besides the noises that Yukon was making while running with me. But thankfully, mercifully, after who knows how long, the heavy air and the sounds disappeared, and moments later we ran into another group of hikers. They were obviously startled by Yukon and we probably looked beyond frazzled, but I didn't care. I just wanted to get away. I was going to tell the hikers that something was chasing us, but I just couldn't muster myself up to do it. It all seemed crazy. Being stalked by voices in the woods? Nobody was going to believe me. I think I made up an excuse on the spot, like we were going for a jog or something. I don't think they quite believed me, but they let us walk back to the campsite area with them nonetheless, and I'm forever grateful for that. This whole thing was just getting worse, and worse, and worse. I was being stalked. I knew that now, but what was it? At first I considered a serial killer, but no. Something about this felt animal. I don't know. The eyes I saw, they just couldn't have possibly been human. And the silence, what about that dead silence, with the heavy air? By this point I was developing clinical paranoia, but it only really went into full swing around forests or mountainous sceneries. And still, I hadn't told anyone. Like I said, I was a rationalist. I was always the skeptical one. No one would take me seriously. I just hid it, even from my wife. Because even then, though it was small, there was a part of me still saying it was all in my head. A side effect of medication or something. Or even some convoluted, sick prank, but this past winter, my fears were finally solidified. It was a snowmobiling trip. I don't know why I agreed to go. I think I was pressured into it. I tried to make up excuses like work or something similar, but those kept getting shot down. My dad knew I was free, he knew me, and somehow, I agreed to go. He wanted me to go with him and his friend on an overnight trip to do some ice fishing. The date was set, and on the morning we departed, my heart was beating harder than it should. During the trek, I stayed as close as I possibly could on my snowmobile to the two other snowmobiles, and whenever I could, I positioned myself in between the two so I was neither in the front or the back. My paranoia was high, and I was taking all the precautions. But, as fate would have it, the weather was not favorable. At sunset, snow started to fall heavily. Visibility was abysmal. I was in between my father and his friend was in the lead, and my father was in the back. My snowmobile started having some issues, and I started falling behind the lead, but I thought it was fine since my father was behind me, and I could still see the lead's tracks. I was very, very wrong. I stopped my snowmobile and hopped off to take a look at some things, expecting my father to stop behind me. He didn't. Once my engine stopped, there was only silence. The falling snow deadened any and all other sound. It was getting dark, I was alone. I started to panic. That's when the dreaded silence started to get heavier and heavier, and heavier. I didn't think the silence during a gentle snowfall could get any more deep. And the air got heavier. And heavier. And again, in the tree line to my left, I heard a voice. The voice of my wife. "Come here, it's me. I need you." I snatched my flashlight from my bag and shined it towards the direction of the sound. What I saw has scarred me for the rest of my life. At first, I thought it was a pile of pale tree limbs. But then I saw two pinpoints of light reflecting back at me, and I knew what I was really looking at. It was tall, at least 6 feet, and it was bipedal. It had pale, almost dead-looking skin that seemed too tight for its body, stretched over a thin and bony frame. It almost looked like if it moved the bones would pierce the skin. Its eyes were sunken, its cheeks as well, and it had thin, cracked lips with something black dried on them. But what struck me the most were its hands. Its fingers were inhumanly long. Who am I kidding? It was all inhuman, and they ended in massive, curved, black claws. It let out an unnatural and ungodly shriek when the light hit it. I thought I was going to die. Without any hesitation, I dropped the flashlight and leapt onto my snowmobile and started it as fast as I have in my entire life. Without any care of where I was going or where my father was or anything, I pushed that snowmobile to its limit. I just wanted to get away. I didn't look back. After a few minutes of riding hard, I finally turned on my GPS and started heading back to where we had parked our cars. I didn't slow down once. I don't know how long it took or what time it was, I just know it was dark. At the parking lot I jumped off my snowmobile and into my car quick as lightning, and I drove out of there without a second thought. I didn't feel safe until I got home a half hour later, and even then I still felt terrified by what I had seen. The thing that had been stalking me. I don't remember much after that. I only remember locking the doors and not sleeping that night. And I still didn't tell anyone. Not even my wife. I told my father that I had just gotten separated from the group, so I headed home myself. He picked up my snowmobile since he had the trailer. This brings me to my problem. I haven't been near any forest or woodlands or anything since that experience, and I don't ever want to go near. The problem is, my family is starting to go camping again, and I don't know how to tell them I'm not going back. And I want to tell them to never go back, not with that thing out there. I don't want anybody to know where this was so they don't go looking for it. I don't want anybody, especially the people I love, to go there. I don't know how to tell them. I need to find a way. Thank you for reading my accounts, and thank you if you believe me. Any advice on this would help me greatly. I need answers. People need to know that there's something evil out there. Story 10, an old family friend asked me to babysit for them. I wish I never went. This story happened half my life ago, when I was a wee lad of only 16. I was in high school and it was summer break. I had gone out to the country during the summer to hang out with my grandparents who ran a farm with some small livestock, veggies and fruit. We used to visit the farm all the time before that, specifically when I was in my preteens and early childhood. My mom grew up on the farm and always had an affinity for the old way of life, and she wanted me to experience that too. I didn't mind all that much. I hadn't been here in years, life got busy. It was nice to experience something so different from city living, or so I thought. My mom had some friends from back in the day that lived close to the farm. Most had all moved away, except for one couple, Nancy and Derek. I don't remember Nancy or Derek from my trips when I was younger, but Nancy's parents were friends with my grandparents, and Nancy grew up playing with my mom. Derek would come over occasionally to help my grandfather with some farm chores every now and again, and that is how him and I reconnected after all of this years. I didn't remember him, but he remembered me. Derek came over one morning after I had finished breakfast to help my grandpa with moving some hay for a couple of horses my grandpa had. I wasn't very good dealing with hay, I had a terrible allergy to it. So I sat outside the barn and watched these manly men work away. Afterwards, Derek came and sat down next to me to have a glass of water. "Hey Nick, it's been a while. Do you remember me?" "Hey, no, sorry. My grandpa said earlier this morning that Derek was coming over and your wife was friends with my mom." "That's right. Nancy and your mom were really close right around your age. I knew your mom as well. We all grew up really close to each other. God, we got into a lot of trouble back in the day." I didn't really know what else to say. It's not like a 16-year-old city boy had much in common with a rough, 40-year-old farmer. So we sat in silence for a few more moments before my grandpa came out of the barn and hollered at Derek to help. "Hey Nick. What are you doing tomorrow night?" "Nancy and I wouldn't mind going out for a date night, but we need someone to watch our 3-year-old, Joseph. Do you think you'd be up for a night of babysitting?" I didn't really have much else going on, and the thought of making a quick $40 for a couple of hours of playing video games and drinking Mountain Dew while a toddler snoozed in a room over was pretty enticing, so I agreed. Nancy and Derek's place was only about a 15-minute walk from my grandparents' farm. I made my way over there the next day at around 5 p.m. I was a little early, but Nancy and Derek didn't mind. I rang the doorbell, and Nancy opened the door. "Oh my goodness. Look at you. You look just like your mother did at that age," Nancy exclaimed. "Oh. Thanks, I guess. I wasn't too fond of being compared to my mom in the looks department, but I was always told to be polite when someone gives me a compliment." Nancy brought me in and fed me some pasta with meat sauce. Not going to lie, it was one of the best meals I've ever had. She went upstairs to get Joe ready and brought him down to meet me. "Honey, this is Nick. Nick is going to look after you for a few hours while Mommy and Daddy go out for dinner, okay?" Nancy said in a baby voice. "No. No," yelled Joe. At this point I'm thinking, what the hell did I get myself into? I have no idea how to babysit. I've never done it in my life. I start to panic, but I hide my anxiety from Nancy. Nancy leaves to go back upstairs and get ready. A few moments later, both her and Derek emerge from upstairs and come down to say their goodbyes. "Nick, Joe is to be in bed by 8 p.m. Just give him a warm bottle of milk and he will fall right asleep. After he is asleep, please go into the basement to watch TV. We have some video games down there from when Derek's younger brother visited last summer. Please do not watch TV on the main floor after Joe is asleep. The walls are paper thin and he'll wake up pretty easily from the sound. Other than that, our place is your place, so have fun. We should be home around 10:30–11. And just like that, Nancy and Derek were out the door. One thing I forgot to mention earlier, is that Nancy and Derek's place is pretty large. I wouldn't call it a mansion, but it's made of stone and is probably close to 3,500 square feet. Lots of rooms, cold-looking place. I had never been here before, and some parts of the house were dark and gave me the creeps. Specifically the basement. Joe and I spent the next couple of hours doing nothing eventful. We had some ice cream, watched a little TV and played with his toys. I thought this was going to be harder, but it was actually pretty chill. While we were playing Baby Monopoly, I heard a rather large thud come from what seemed like the basement. I paused for a moment, wondering if I would hear it again, but never did. I chalked it up to being noises from an old house. Eventually, 8 p.m. rolled around and I prepared Joe's milk for him, gave him some time to drink it, then put him to bed. Again, all rather easy. It was about 8:15 now, and I knew I was going to be able to get in a solid 2-hour gaming sesh. I slowly closed Joe's door and creeped down the stairs. I stood at the landing above the basement steps and just sort of stared down into the darkness. I don't know why, but something was just off, you know? About the basement. I don't know why, but looking down along the stone walls into the basement made my skin crawl. I turned the light on and slowly crept down the basement steps until I made my way into a rather large room with a couple of couches, some art on the wall, a TV with a PlayStation, book stands, etc. A mini man cave. The room was a bit dark still, so I went to the middle and pulled the switch to turn on the light in the center of the room. I'll never forget what I saw when the light turned on. In the corner of the room, was this 6-foot-tall statue of a clown. Pinstripe suit, white face points, red nose and red wig. Everything you would think a clown would wear. I have no idea what the fuck this thing was doing down there, it seemed so out of place with the rest of the decor. It was just staring at me. It looked lifelike. I couldn't take my eyes off of it, but it was so scary at the same time. I felt like the statue was looking through me. I eventually took my mind off of it. I browsed through the PlayStation games and eventually came along the game called Twisted Metal. Coincidence that there is a friggin' crazy clown on the cover of the game? I start playing, and every few minutes I gaze over to the statue, just staring at me. After about 20 minutes, I became super uncomfortable. I don't know why. I just couldn't handle the clown staring at me even though I knew it was a dumb statue. I eventually shut off the PlayStation, turned off the lights and ran up the stairs. I went into the living room and turned on the TV. Remember that Nancy and Derek said Joe could easily wake up from the sound. I muted it and watched game shows. Anything was better than being down in that creepy-ass basement with that creepy-ass clown. Around 9:30 I get a call on my cell from Nancy calling to check in. Hi Nick. Nancy here. How are you and Joe doing? We're fine, I put Joe down a few hours ago. I said, oh that's wonderful. I hope you aren't too bored now. Did you manage to set up the video games? No, I decided I would just watch TV on mute in the living room, I said in displeasure. Oh dear, why is that? Could you not get the video games set up properly? No, I played for a little bit, but that clown statue you guys have in your basement, it really freaked me out, so I thought I would just watch TV in the living room on mute so I don't wake Joe. The other end went dead silent for what felt like an eternity. Nick, go into Joey's room and lock the door. We're on our way home right now. What the fuck? The phone shut off immediately after that. At this point my heart is racing. I quickly turn off the TV and head towards the stairs. On my way towards the stairs, I look down towards the basement steps and I see the clown statue standing still at the basement step landing. That same damn expression, staring at me, not moving. I am now freaking out beyond belief and book it to Joe's room. I close the door and lock it and put my back to it. A few moments later, I hear scurrying from the main floor. Like someone is running back and forth. Whatever is scurrying down there starts to say, I'm gonna getcha. I'm gonna getcha. He in a really high-pitched voice. The scurrying intensifies and then it stops all of the sudden. A few moments go by, and the scurrying picks up even louder and is now at the top of the stairs, near all of the bedrooms. Whatever it is scurrying around the top floor now, saying time for supper. Time for supper. I'm gonna getcha, tee-hee. Tee-hee. I am crying now. Joe eventually wakes up and starts saying he wants his mum. I almost put a pillow on his face to make him shut up, but I figured Nancy and Derek would be pretty upset if I suffocated their child in my anxiety-riddled state, so I simply covered his mouth. At this point he's crying, and fussing, and starting to get really frustrated. The sounds from the outside hallway stop, but I can see the shadow of someone standing right outside the door from underneath the door. A slender knock comes on the door, and then a rattling of the door handle. In a very deep, gurgly voice, whatever outside the door says your time has come. Give me my dinner and you will be spared. At this point I don't know what to think. I guess I thought this is it. I'm gonna die. The crazy person on the other side of the door wants me to exchange Joe for my own life. The door handle is rattling even harder now, slamming on the door. I just have Joe covering his mouth with my eyes closed and I'm rocking back and forth hoping that this nightmare will be over. Out of nowhere, the banging stops, and I hear feet scurrying away, down the stairs, and down to the basement. I hear another loud thud, the same one that I heard earlier in the night, followed by sirens. The rest is sort of a blur. I hear some loud banging on the main door, a very large bang which I presumed was the main door being forced open. A couple of men who sounded like police officers mentioning something about doing a sweep of the house. Eventually, 2 cops make our way to Joe's room and ask us to open the door. I guess Nancy told them that we were in there. After another 15 minutes, Nancy and Derek are home. I start to cry as soon as I see them. A 16-year-old boy, I thought I was tough but I really could not handle what had just happened. The cops sit me down to question me and I explain everything to them, about what had happened. They thank me for my time and tell Nancy and Derek that they will keep 2 police cars stationed outside their house for the remainder of the evening. One of the cops offers to drive me home, which I wholeheartedly agree to. It wasn't until a few weeks later, when I was back at home in the city with my parents, that I figured out what happened. Nancy had called my mom to explain, and I overheard their conversation. Apparently, there is a mental asylum about a 20-minute drive from Nancy and Derek's place. One of the patients had escaped earlier that day, ran through the woods, and made his way to Nancy and Derek's place. One of the doors in the basement was unlocked, so he just walked right in. This was the first thud, I think. He found one of Derek's dressers in the basement with a bunch of old clothes from Halloween, and changed out of his patient clothes and put on the clown costume. They found the makeup that the crazy was wearing in bathroom next to the basement. Apparently this patient was known for cannibalism on small children, which is why he was in the hospital in the first place. He would apparently lure children away in a clown costume that he used to own, snatch them and eat them. I guess he got lucky and found both a clown costume and a small child in the same house, go figure. I don't know why he went into statue mode when he saw me. I guess I wasn't his type. Perhaps he didn't want to struggle, I really have no idea. The scariest part of all of this is that they never caught him. He's still out there, in Derek's clown costume, looking for children to consume. So if you see a clown statue that looks too lifelike, run. Story 11, Him. A few weeks back a friend and I decided to go to this 2-week-long theatre camp on the border of Manitoba and Ontario somewhere. Don't ask me where exactly, I'm bad with geography. We picked this camp because it seemed cool and like it would further enrich our education as we're both theatre majors. We arrived here a few days ago. The camp itself was pretty cool, and not super outdoors. Why? The dorm building was a long rectangle and had 2 floors of just dorms. Outside, there was a stone auditorium for anyone who wanted to perform in the fresh air. Across from that, there was another large rectangular building that had an actual raised theater in the basement, with loads of rehearsal rooms on the main and second floor. The registration building was at the front gates, which was a solid 15 to 20-minute walk away and was tiny, so no one really went out there. The first day went off without a hitch. We were having fun, making new friends, and getting so much work in. We even had plans to act in a play someone had written during the first few days of camp. It wasn't until the second morning that we met him. I don't even remember what his name was, or if he even had a name, so I'll just refer to him as him. Him was not a student/camper, So I automatically assumed he was a counselor, and he was intimidating as fuck. The best way I can describe him was that he was a cross between Robert Downey Jr. and Jeffrey Dean Morgan. Him sat across from me on that second morning while I was eating alone, and he knew my name. I smiled, trying to be polite, and in hindsight I really think that was the worst thing I could have possibly done. He started talking to me about the camp, asking if I enjoyed it so far, and I replied as to be kind. He asked a few questions about myself and I replied, though not giving too much detail. He tended to respond with interest in my life. While him was intimidating, he was not creepy, or did he give me any vibe that he might be someone to not hang around. He was actually quite friendly and definitely easy to hang around. Things started to get weird when I spoke to friends about him later in the day. Nobody knew his name, and when we asked another counselor about him, they had no idea who we had been talking about. We chalked this up to the fact that maybe he was a groundskeeper or manager or something, but we never confirmed that with anyone else. I really wish that we had. It wasn't until a few days later that my friend and I, along with some other people from the camp, decided to sneak out of our dorm at night and drink around our own little campfire. When him showed up, we were all suddenly defeated. We all thought we'd been caught by a real adult. I only say real because we're all technically adults, just young ones, and we're going to be forced to put out our fire and head back to bed. Except that's not what happened at all. Him stood looming above us and he smiled the most estranged smile I'd ever seen. Slowly his lips parted as he spoke to us, claiming us as his new pets. One of the boys I was there with jumped up. "What the hell are you talking about? Why can't you just send us back to our dorms and be done with it? I'm not here for free slave labor." Without breaking eye contact with me, him reached a hand out and wrapped his fingers around the boy's wrist. With his brute strength, he pulled the boy closer and whispered something in his ear that made the boy turn pale white instantly. He then released the boy, who dropped to his knees with a blank stare on his face and tears streaming down his face. I felt tears come to my eyes. I was absolutely petrified of him suddenly, and I wanted nothing but to run far from here. In fear of dying right there and then, I tried to get up and run back through the bushes to alert someone to our whereabouts, but couldn't. Him's magnetic gaze kept me frozen in place, his stare feeling like it had been piercing my soul. I blinked and him was in front of me now, pulling me up to be standing next to him. He declared to everyone that I was his new toy, his favorite of the bunch. If anyone dared try to even so much as touch me, he wouldn't hesitate to kill them. He let go of me for a moment to grab one of the other girls, drawing her sleeve upwards as she protested, and digging a long line down her arm using only his fingernail. She bled instantly as him explained that what he did as proof that what happened tonight was real. Him smiled down at me, his terrifying smile from before, and I started to cry. Tears freely coming from my eyes as I wanted to scream out and protest everything he was saying, but again, I could not. Him hushed me, caressing the back of my head and letting me cry into his shoulder. I woke up in my dorm and that was the last thing I remember from last night. All the people that were with me last night at our own campfire now won't even look at me, not even my friend from school. I hadn't seen him at all yet today. I'm sure he's lurking around somewhere, but he has not made an appearance. At least not to me. I had been going to all camp activities as usual, but like I said before, all the people from the campfire are avoiding me like the plague, and telling others to stay away as well. I'm being ostracized by nearly everyone, not to mention jumping at every corner I go around in fear of running into him again. It was during lunch that I saw one of the girls also from the campfire standing in the middle of auditorium. She was staring up at the sky and she was screaming at the top of her lungs. It was a blood-curdling scream that pierced everyone's ears and could likely be heard from miles away. I then realized that she was the girl that him had cut last night. Everyone in the camp was startled. People looked to see what she was looking at and saw nothing. Some people grabbed her to try and shake her out of it, but nothing worked and she held her stance firmly. Her scream continued and I wondered when she would stop to take a breath, but she never did. Eventually camp counselors escorted her away, her scream continuing as she protested being pulled out of the auditorium. As they carried her out, we saw blood beginning to drip from her ears and soak her long, blonde hair. Her bandage that was on her cut arm was red, which made it look like the wound reopened and began bleeding yet again. When I turned my head away from the girl, I saw the people from the campfire all staring at me with pure terror in their eyes. I took a step, reaching out towards them to try and say something, but instead I was stopped and felt a hand rest on my shoulder. The hairs on the back of my neck rose as I turned to look to see who was holding on to me. I don't even know why I looked. I already knew who it was. He smiled back at me, his empty, terrifying smile, and I started to cry once more. What power did him have where he was able to make me cry the way I did? Able to make that girl scream non-stop the way she did? To make everyone petrified of him? I turned back to my friends with my eyes wide and tears pouring from my eyes non-stop. Him explained that the cut he'd given that girl was his mark. He used her as a warning. If we were to ever disobey him, he'd give us that mark and said that we'd end up the same way she did. Then slowly, him did the same as he did last night, caressing my head and pulling me into a hug so that I could cry into his shoulder. I jumped at his every touch. How he was so gentle with me and not everyone else, I don't understand. I was so scared that he would mark me and that I would end up like that girl or worse, dead. Then I heard his voice, albeit I don't believe he was talking to just me, as he told everyone to meet back in the forest where we'd had our bonfire last night. Again, that was that thing I remembered before waking up, back in my bunk. It was night time when I woke up, which meant that I was supposed to be going to the spot in the forest from last night. I'm worried him is going to hurt me or someone else. I need to go to the forest, but I feel absolutely paralyzed by my fear. I got up, still fully dressed from the day, and exited the dorm building. I began walking towards the edge of the camp when I hear about a bus that's taking a few frightened people back home. The incident with the girl screaming had shaken them up and they decided to cut their stay short. That was it. My escape. My way out of here. I quickly ran towards the administration building and begged the counselors there to let me leave. After a few minutes of pleading, they eventually put me on the list and told me to go pack my things up. I thanked them and made my way back to the dorm room building with relief overcoming me. I packed my bags as quickly as possible before hearing the bus pull up. I bolted it to the exit of the building and waited before they allowed me to get on the bus. As I walked towards the back, I slowly began to notice that everyone on the bus were the people from the bonfire. My heart skipped a beat for a moment before I realized that we were all taking this as our ticket to get out of here, to get away from him. A few minutes passed and sure enough the bus lurched forwards and we traveled back down the gravel road until we reached the highway. Once on the highway, it felt like the entire bus let out the biggest sigh of relief. I started crying again. I was so happy and relieved that we escaped. Sobs overwhelmed me and I smiled before the bus came to a slow, lurching halt. I should have realized that the crying was a sign that we weren't free after all.